They moved like shadows beneath the canopy, massive, armored, and deliberate. In the heart of the ancient Khmer Empire, where jungle and stone coiled into each other like twin serpents, the elephant was not just a beast, it was a god, a weapon, a symbol of wrath and kingship. Across the blood-red soil of ancient Cambodia, from Angkor's labyrinthian temples to the hostile borders of Champa, war elephants thundered through the centuries. Their arrival was never silent. Bells chimed from their necks, their tusks gleamed with bronze, and their presence shifted the very ground. This was no myth. This was history written in crushed bone and trampled earth. As the empire rose from sacred rivers and divine mandates, it forged not only stone but strategy. Elephants, towering and trained for war, became the steel pulse of Khmer campaigns. They were bred, blessed, and broken for one purpose: domination. Tonight, we descend into the shadowed past, where armies marched under monsoon skies and kings rode high on towers of living flesh. This is not a tale of innocence, it is one of blood, ritual, and survival. You are now entering the world of Angkor's war elephants. Part 1. The Iron Forest Marches, Elephants, and the Rise of Angkor. They were not born of war, but shaped by it. Beneath the thick canopy of Cambodia's ancient forests, amid the roar of monsoon winds and the hiss of unseen serpents, the war elephant was forged not only in body but in spirit, towering above the foot soldier and the common beast alike. The Khmer war elephant moved like a fortress of flesh and iron. In the eyes of the empire, they were not merely animals. They were extensions of power, of fear, of the very will of the king. When the Khmer Empire began its rise in the 9th century, under the sacred banner of Jayavarman II, the elephant was already etched into the region's myth and memory. Revered as an avatar of gods, feared as a bringer of ruin, the elephant was pulled from the wild and pressed into the machinery of conquest. But taming such giants was not an act of dominion, it was a ritual, as sacred as it was brutal. The jungle knew their first cries. From calf to colossus, elephants were taken into training grounds, hidden beyond the reach of common eyes. Where chants rose like smoke and Mahautsta, elephant keepers spoke in a tongue meant for beasts and spirits. They did not whip or beat their charges, they whispered. They bound themselves to the elephant's mind through offerings and touch, creating a bond so profound that no army dared to march without them. The Khmer kings understood this bond. They understood that war was not won with numbers alone, but with symbols, images that could break enemy spirits before the first arrow flew. And nothing shattered resolve like the sight of dozens of elephants marching shoulder to shoulder, their foreheads daubed with ash and sacred oils, their tusks sheathed in steel, their bells ringing like war hymns. Angkor did not conquer in silence. When it rose, it did so on the backs of elephants. Jayavarman II, the empire's most celebrated warrior king, unleashed elephants upon the eastern borders in his war against the Kham. The kingdom of Champa, fierce and fluid, had struck deep into Khmer lands, even sacking Angkor itself. But Jayavarman VII answered not with words, but with elephants. His counterstrike, a campaign that stretched across jungles and rivers, was spearheaded by colossal war beasts that tore through enemy formations like storm winds through dry grass. Chroniclers tell of elephants armored with layered bronze and leather, their tusks tipped with iron, their legs wrapped in rattling chains to terrify both horse and man. They smashed palisades, uprooted barricades, and crushed cavalry beneath their weight. But perhaps more terrifying than their power was their precision. How these creatures responded to the cries of their mahouts, pivoting with discipline honed through years of spiritual training. Each elephant in Jayavarman's army bore not just a rider but a shriner canopy of wood and gold, under which nobles or commanders issued orders. These mobile towers loomed high over the battlefield, giving generals the vantage point of gods. With the signal sometimes a shout, sometimes a raised hand, waves of infantry and archers surged in coordination with the elephants, who led the charge or broke enemy lines from the flanks. This was not mindless rampage. This was orchestrated destruction. The elephant was not chaos, it was control, and it was through this control that Angkor reclaimed its throne. Yet for every battle won, there were sacrifices few recorded. Behind the glory of the war, elephants stood a legion of unnamed caretakers, mahouts, who slept beside their charges, fed them by hand, prayed before their tusks, and sometimes died beneath their feet. In times of battle, a wounded or panicked elephant could become a hurricane of flesh, killing friend and foe alike. Some mahouts carried poison to use on themselves or their mounts if control was lost. There are tales, grim and whispered, of men crushed trying to calm a rampaging elephant whose kin had fallen beside it, of sacred oaths made to never abandon the beast, even as arrows blackened the sky. In peacetime, the elephant did not rest. It carried stone blocks for temples, joined royal parades as symbols of divine right, and appeared in harvest festivals as living embodiments of rain-bringing deities. Children were taught to bow before them. Priests wove garlands to hang around their trunks, and the older ones, too frail for war, were led in quiet procession through the jungle to die where they were born. Surrounded by chants and incense, no creature was so deeply interwoven with the Khmer soul. But war has a way of hollowing even the sacred. As the Khmer Empire expanded, its enemies grew more numerous and more cunning. In the deep south, the lands of Dai Viet and the fractured remnants of Srivijaya posed new threats. Their strategies adapted. Traps were laid in marshes. Archers were trained to blind elephants. War dogs, fire pits, and sharpened bamboo fences turned once certain charges into chaos. The elephants still thundered, still broke through, but the cost grew heavier. The empire responded with darker arts. Captured elephants from enemy lands were retrained, repainted, and unleashed against their former masters. Some say black magic was used, that priests marked their hides with cursed symbols to drive them into frenzy. Among the ruins of Beng Milia and Banti Chemar, faded carvings show elephants tearing enemy soldiers limb from limb, lifting chariots into the air, and trampling enemy kings beneath their bloodied feet. These were not decorative motifs, these were warnings, messages carved in stone, eternal and unmoving, that told any who approached. Here, beasts were turned to war, and war became religion. The elephant was not just a weapon, it was a theater of war in itself. Its presence changed every tactic, every movement, every chant sung by the priests before battle. Even the food stockpiled by armies was calculated with elephants in mind. Hundreds of pounds of fruit, bamboo, and water per day per beast. A campaign that lacked proper supply lines could lose its elephants before the first enemy was even met. And without the elephant, morale crumbled. Still, the Khmer kings persisted. Their vision was not limited to conquest, it was transcendence. In their temples, especially at Bayon and Angkor Thom, or elephants stand etched alongside scenes of daily life. Mothers grinding rice, monks in prayer, children playing by lotus ponds. The message is clear. To the Khmer, the elephant was not a creature of war alone. It was life, it was death. It was the axis upon which both turn. The shadows of these jungle ruins, where stone roots coil around sandstone walls, and the faces of gods gaze out through vines. The echoes of elephant steps still linger, not in sound, but in memory. The memory of a time when beasts led kings into battle, when gods rode upon their backs, and when the line between man and animal blurred under the bloodied sun of conquest. They were more than warriors. They were witnesses, and the jungle has not forgotten them. Part 2. Blood, Bells, and Bronze. War Rituals and Elephant Wrath. At the height of the Khmer Empire's power, when the stone towers of Angkor Wat reached toward the heavens like the fingers of forgotten gods, the empire was not only defended by walls or spears, was protected by belief. And belief, in the world of the Khmer, walked on 4 legs, weighed several tons, and carried the voices of gods on its breath. The elephant had become more than a beast of war. It was the empire's beating heart, sacred and sacrificial, adored and feared, a living altar of duty and blood. Long before battle cries echoed across jungle valleys, long before soldiers painted their faces with war dyes and priests lit the incense, a different kind of ritual began. In hidden clearings far from the eyes of the common folk, elephants were anointed. Priests marked their foreheads with blessed oils. Young mahouts laid flower garlands upon their tusks. Sacred drums beat in a rhythm meant to mimic the heartbeat of the world. Offerings of sugarcane, banana leaves, and incense smoke filled the air, not just to please the elephants, but to summon the spirits that lived within them. For in Khmer cosmology, the elephant was not merely a creature, it was a vessel for divine power, a mount of celestial beings. To prepare an elephant for war was to prepare the gods themselves for battle. These rituals were not reserved for kings alone. In the rice fields and stilt villages surrounding the Angkor heartlands, peasants knelt and prayed when they saw the elephants pass. Some believed to see an elephant before dawn was an omen of death. Others left offerings of rice and rainwater along the road, hoping to please the guardian spirits that followed in the beast's shadows. Mothers would lift their children to see the elephants, backs telling them stories passed down from generations. Of the elephant who carried the first king from the mountains, of the one who wept when its mahout was killed in battle, of the white elephant that appeared only in times of great change. The white elephant, in particular, was revered, rare, almost mythical. Its sighting was considered a divine signal, a mark that heaven had chosen a ruler or warned of his fall. Kings went to war not only for territory, but sometimes to claim a white elephant rumored to live in enemy lands. Such a beast, once brought into the imperial stables, was not ridden. It was worshipped. Priests built it its own shrine. Attendants fed it by hand. It became a symbol of kingship itself. But such blessings always came with a price. White elephants brought with them the weight of prophecy, and with prophecy came fear. The common people lived in the shadow of these giants. While the capital city buzzed with rituals and command, the countryside bore the burden of feeding them. Each war elephant consumed nearly 300 pounds of food daily. Villages were taxed, not in coin but in fruit, sugarcane, and labor. Men were drafted to cut roads through the jungle to allow elephants to march. Women wove thick saddles and armor cloths from hemp and silk. Children filled water troughs. It was said that to serve the elephant was to serve the empire itself. Yet among the peasants, whispers grew. Some feared the beasts, believing that once they tasted blood in battle, they were never the same. That in the silence of night, chained in their imperial stables, the elephants remembered every scream, every shattered bone beneath their feet. There were stories never told near temples that elephants could go mad and tear through villages, driven by the ghosts of those they had trampled. Some mahouts claimed they had seen their elephants cry after war, standing still for days, refusing food, eyes fixed on something invisible and distant. The duality was impossible to ignore. The same trunk that lifted a lotus flower in ritual could crush a soldier's skull like papaya in the mud. The same creature that carried the king's golden throne into battle was also capable of unspeakable devastation, and the empire, so rich in wisdom, art, and spirituality, harnessed this power not blindly, but willingly. Angkor was not ignorant of its war machine. It immortalized it. On the sandstone walls of the Bayon Temple, among the smiling faces of Avalokiteshvara, lie endless battle friezes. You will find no whitewashed idealism here. These are not tales of nobility or sterile glory. They are raw, brutal. Elephants lifting enemy soldiers high into the air before dashing them into the earth. Mahouts plunging spears into enemy ranks while blood pools beneath the beast's feet. Priests standing behind elephants, chanting invocations as arrows rain from the sky. Every inch of these carvings speaks of violence and divinity, of duty and madness. But beyond these violent murals, behind the splendor of Angkor's throne rooms, another world continued, spinning a quieter one, a more human one. In the stillness between campaigns, when the rains returned and the rivers swelled, the elephants walked among farmers, no longer armored, no longer war beasts, just creatures of muscle and memory. They pulled logs, they cleared land, some were taken into festivals, where they were bathed in perfumes and led through villages dressed in golden cloths. The same hands that once tied armor to their flanks now tied flower garlands to their ears. The same voices that shouted commands in battle now sang lullabies to calm them as thunder cracked across the sky. In these moments, the elephant became something more, a mirror, a reflection of the Empire's soul. For every sword it carried into war, it also carried silence and healing. The scars on their skin matched the scars in the land and in the people. And yet, the elephant's greatest tragedy may not have been war, but time. As the centuries turned and Angkor's light began to fade, so too did its war elephants. The rains grew harsher, trade routes shifted, enemies became stronger, faster, with weapons that cared little for size or legacy. The very jungles that once birthed the Empire's greatest weapons began to reclaim the roads. Elephants died in forgotten battles. Others were taken by invaders. Some simply vanished into the mist. When the Siamese finally sacked Angkor in the 15th century, they took more than gold and relics. They took elephants both as spoils and symbols. And those that remained, once proud and sacred, were left to wander ruins, now wrapped in roots and silence. Today, their bones are dust, but their stories remain etched in the walls, in the songs of the forest, in the bloodline of the land itself. We remember them not as animals, but as warriors, as mourners, as gods, as monsters, as companions, as ghosts. When you walk the paths of Angkor now, past the faces of stone kings and the cracked steps of ancient sanctuaries, listen closely. Sometimes, if the wind is right, you may still hear the faint jingle of bells, not from the temples, but from the necks of war elephants marching once more through the jungle, in memories too heavy to die. Until next time, stay safe, and see you in the next history.